The needle marks on his arm were fresh, but Marcus couldn't remember the injection that made them. He sat on the edge of the hospital bed, staring at the plastic bracelet around his wrist that read Experimental Subject Block 44 in bold red letters. The VA Medical Center in San Diego hummed with the familiar sounds of institutional life, distant conversations, rolling gurneys, the electronic beeping of monitors, but his room felt isolated, forgotten. When he'd pressed the call button minutes ago, no one had come. The mirror across from his bed reflected a stranger. Same brown eyes, same scar along his jawline from Kandahar, but something fundamental had shifted. The face looking back belonged to someone he should know intimately, yet felt as foreign as a passport photo of a distant relative. "You're awake." A woman in scrubs appeared in the doorway, clipboard pressed against her chest like armor. Her name tag read Sarah Chen, RN, but her expression suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "How are you feeling, Mr. Rodriguez?" Rodriguez? The name felt wrong in his mouth. "I thought. Isn't my name Marcus Williams?" Nurse Chen's pen stopped moving across her clipboard. "You've been experiencing some confusion since the procedure." "It's normal." "What procedure?" He touched the bandage on his temple, feeling the raised edges of what seemed like a surgical incision. "Nobody's told me anything. I wake up 3 days ago with no memory of how I got here, and everyone keeps talking around me like I'm not in the room. Dr. Hendricks will be by shortly to explain everything." She checked his bag, avoiding eye contact. "Your vitals look good. The memory issues should resolve as the medication works through your system." "What medication?" But she was already walking away, her soft-soled shoes squeaking against the linoleum. Marcus Rodriguez apparently swung his legs over the side of the bed. The room spun briefly, then settled. Through the window, he could see the Pacific, stretching endlessly westward, dotted with naval vessels that looked like toys from this height. The sight triggered something, a flash of standing on a different deck, salt spray hitting his face. But the memory dissolved before he could grasp it. His clothes were in the small closet, desert camouflage with Rodriguez stitched above the right pocket and sergeant stripes on the sleeves. But in the breast pocket, he found a different set of dog tags. Williams, Marcus D. The metal was warm against his palm, familiar in a way that made his chest tight. The hallway outside his room stretched in both directions, lined with identical doors. Room for 141, for 142, for 143. His was for 144. Block 44. Most of the other rooms appeared empty, their doors standing open to reveal stripped beds and disconnected equipment. But from 447 came the sound of someone crying long, broken sobs that seemed to echo his own confusion. "Excuse me." A man in a white coat approached from the far end of the hall. "Dr. Hendricks." Presumably, though he looked younger than Marcus had expected. "You shouldn't be wandering around. There are protocols." "Protocols for what?" Marcus blocked the doctor's path. "I want answers. Starting with why I have two different names and why nobody can tell me what happened to me." Dr. Hendricks glanced around nervously, then guided Marcus into an empty room. "There was an incident during your deployment. Severe head trauma. We've been trying experimental treatments to restore your cognitive function." "Experimental treatments?" Marcus held up his wrist. "Like whatever earned me this bracelet." "The memory reconstruction. Therapy is still in trials, but your case was unique. You volunteered for the program." "I volunteered to forget who I am. You volunteered to remember." The doctor's voice carried an edge of impatience. "The trauma had completely fragmented your identity. We're essentially rebuilding your neural pathways from the ground up." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. "Show me my records. Show me the consent forms I signed. Patient confidentiality prevents me from I'm the patient." The words came out louder than intended, echoing off the sterile walls. "I'm asking to see my own medical records." Dr. Hendricks hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "I need to make some calls. Stay in your room. Someone will be with you shortly." But Marcus was already walking away, following the sound of crying to room 447. The door was ajar, and through the gap he could see another patient, younger than himself, maybe mid-20s, sitting on his bed with his head in his hands. "Hey, Marcus." Knock softly. "You okay?" The young man looked up, revealing a face marked by the same type of surgical scars Marcus had discovered on his own temple. His wrist bore an identical red bracelet. "They told me my name is David Park, but I keep having dreams about being someone else. Someone named Johnson." Johnson. Something stirred in Marcus's memory. "First name Kevin?" The patient's eyes widened. "How did you know that?" I don't know. But images were surfacing now, fragments of scenes that felt more real than anything since he'd awakened. A convoy moving through desert terrain, radio chatter, The face across from him belonged to Kevin Johnson, his communications specialist. "We served together. Afghanistan, you were my radio man. I remember you too." Kevin's voice was barely a whisper. "Sergeant Williams, you pulled me out of that Humvee after the I'd hit." The hallway suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing, and Marcus grabbed Kevin's arm. "We need to get out of here. Now. They'll stop us, the orderlies." "They're not really orderlies. They're military." Then we move fast and quiet. Marcus's training was kicking in, muscle memory overriding the fog in his head. "Can you walk?" Kevin nodded, pulling the four from his arm with a wince. Blood spotted his hospital gown, but he moved with the quick efficiency of a soldier following orders. They made it to the stairwell before the alarm started. Red lights flashed in the corridors as an automated voice announced a code gray over the intercom. The sound triggered another memory flash, similar alarms in a forward operating base. "The scramble for defensive positions, service elevator," Marcus said, spotting the freight lift at the end of the corridor. "Less likely to be monitored." But as they reached it, the doors opened to reveal two men in security uniforms. Not hospital security, these were military police, complete with sidearms and tactical gear. "Gentlemen, you need to return to your rooms immediately." The taller of the two stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his weapon. "This is for your own safety." "Safety from what?" Marcus demanded. "From remembering who we really are." The MP's expression didn't change. "You're suffering from severe PTSD and traumatic brain injury. The treatment you're receiving is authorized by the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Defense. You sign waivers." "Show me the waivers." Marcus stepped closer, noting how the second MP shifted his stance. "Show me my signature. Show me anything that proves I consented to having my identity erased, sir." "You need to calm down. You're becoming agitated, which can interfere with the treatment protocol." Kevin grabbed Marcus's arm. "There's another way out, the loading dock. I've been watching from my window." They ran. The MPs shouted behind them, but didn't immediately pursue protocol, Marcus realized. Probably required them to call for backup rather than chase potentially unstable patients through. The hospital dot, the loading dock was deserted, the afternoon shift apparently over. Marcus spotted a delivery truck with its keys still in the ignition, careless, but typical of civilian contractors who weren't used to military security protocols. "Can you drive?" he asked Kevin. "I think so. I remember pieces, but what if we're wrong? What if we really are just sick and they're trying to help us?" Marcus looked back at the hospital building, counting floors to identify their wing. Block 44 was on the 4th floor, isolated from the main patient areas. Through the windows, he could see other figures moving, more patients, all wearing the same red bracelets. Then why haven't our families been notified? Why are there no records of us in the system? Why does the nursing staff look terrified every time we ask questions? They climbed into the truck. Kevin's hands shook as he started the engine, but the mechanical action seemed to restore some of his confidence. "Where do we go?" "Camp Pendleton. If we're really Marines, someone there will recognize us." The drive north took 40 minutes, during which more memories surfaced. Marcus remembered his drill instructor's voice, the weight of full combat gear, the metallic taste of fear during his first firefight. Kevin talked through his own returning memories, radio protocols, call signs, the names of their fallen squad mates, but with each recovered memory came new questions. Why were they in AVA hospital instead of the usual military medical facilities? Why the experimental treatments? And why did some of their memories feel edited, like crucial details had been carefully removed? Camp Pendleton's main gate was manned by Marines who took their jobs seriously. The guard examined their hospital bracelets with suspicion, but a quick check of their fingerprints in the system confirmed their identities. "Sergeant Williams, you've been listed as AWOL for 6 weeks, the corporal at the gate told Marcus. "And you, Corporal Johnson, were reported missing from Walter Reed 3 months ago." "Missing?" Kevin's face went pale. "Not transferred, no. Record of any transfer, sir. According to this, you disappeared from your hospital room during the night shift. There's been an ongoing investigation." The base commander, Colonel Sarah Martinez, agreed to see them immediately. Her office was exactly what Marcus expected: American flag, Marine Corps memorabilia, a desk that had seen decades of difficult decisions. But her expression when they entered was one of profound relief. "Jesus Christ, where have you been?" She stood up, studying their faces. "We've had CID investigating your disappearances. Your families have been out of their minds with worry." "Families?" Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. "What families?" Colonel Martinez's expression shifted to concern. "Sergeant Williams, your wife Sarah has been calling daily, and Corporal Johnson, Your parents have been working with the FBI to find you. The room seemed to tilt. Marcus gripped the edge of the colonel's desk. I don't remember a wife. The TBI, Kevin said quietly. They told us we had traumatic brain injuries. You were both injured in the Kandahar incident. Yes. But your medical records show you were recovering well at Walter Reed. Corporal Johnson was actually scheduled for discharge next month. Colonel Martinez pulled up files on her computer. According to this, you both volunteered for an experimental PTSD treatment program at the San Diego VA, but that program doesn't exist. The pieces were clicking into place, but the picture they formed made Marcus's stomach turn. They kidnapped us from military hospitals to use us as test subjects for some kind of memory manipulation. That's a serious accusation. Sergeant, then, explain why we were told we were different people. Why our medical records at the VA show completely different service histories? Why there were at least a dozen other patients in the same wing, all with the same experimental subject bracelets? Colonel Martinez reached for her phone. I'm calling Sid, and I want a full medical evaluation for both of you immediately. The examination at the base hospital revealed what Marcus had begun to suspect. The surgical scars on their temples were from recent procedures, neural implants that had been surgically removed, leaving behind damaged tissue and fragmented memories. Blood tests showed traces of experimental psychoactive compounds, including several that weren't approved for human use. Whoever did this to you was trying to erase specific memories, while leaving others intact, the Navy psychiatrist explained. It's incredibly sophisticated, but also incredibly illegal. This kind of research was supposedly shut down after the Church Committee investigations in the 70s. Marcus thought about the other patients in Block 44, their confused faces and desperate questions. How many others, based on your descriptions? Probably at least 20 subjects. All veterans, all with combat experience and existing head injuries that would provide cover for the neural surgery. The investigation that followed uncovered a web of black budget funding, military contractors, and rogue researchers who had been operating under the cover of legitimate VA programs. The goal, according to documents recovered from the facility, was to develop techniques for selectively erasing traumatic memories in combat veterans and potentially for extracting sensitive information from captured enemies. Marcus's wife Sarah arrived at Camp Pendleton 12 hours after Colonel Martinez made the call. She was smaller than he had imagined, with dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes that suggested a relationship built on years of shared humor. When she saw him, she stopped in the doorway of the hospital room, her hand pressed to her mouth. Marcus? Her voice was uncertain, like she was afraid he might disappear again. I'm sorry, he said, the words feeling inadequate. I don't remember us, but I want to. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and took his hands. We'll figure it out together, just like we always have. Kevin's reunion with his parents was equally emotional, but tinged with anger at what had been stolen from their son. His father, a retired Army sergeant, vowed to personally testify at the court-martial proceedings against the officers who had authorized the program. The trials took 18 months. 12 officers and civilian contractors were convicted of conspiracy, kidnapping, and conducting illegal human experimentation. The VA established new oversight protocols for all experimental programs, and Congress held hearings on preventing future abuses. But for Marcus, the most important recovery wasn't legal or institutional, it was personal. Slowly, with Sarah's patient help, he began to remember pieces of their life together. Their first date at a seafood restaurant in Oceanside, their wedding at the base chapel, the way she sang off-key in the car and never cared who heard her. Some memories never returned. The doctors warned that the damage to his hippocampus might be permanent, leaving gaps that could never be filled. But new memories were forming, and that felt like a different kind of victory. 6 months after their escape from Block 44, Marcus and Kevin were having coffee at a diner near Camp Pendleton, reviewing their testimony for the final sentencing hearing. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't remembered each other? Kevin asked, stirring sugar into his cup. Every day. Marcus looked out at the Pacific, visible through the diner's front window. They almost succeeded. A few more treatments, and we might have forgotten everything that made us who we are. The scary part is how convinced we were that we were different people. Rodriguez and Park, they had whole backstories prepared for us. Marcus nodded, thinking about the false documents they'd found in his hospital room. The fabricated service records that painted him as a different person entirely. The researchers had been remarkably thorough in their deception. There's something I never told you, Kevin said quietly. About the night before we escaped, I remembered something else. Not about our deployment, about the hospital. What about it? I remembered volunteering. Not for the program they told us about, but for something else, a study on treating PTSD. With new therapeutic techniques, they showed us forums, talked about potential side effects, but nothing about memory erasure or identity reconstruction. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. You think we really did volunteer? I think we volunteered for something completely different than what they did to us. The consent forms were probably legal cover for a legitimate study, but somewhere along the way, the program got hijacked by people with a different agenda. It was a disturbing thought that their ordeal had begun with their own willingness to help advance treatment for other veterans suffering from PTSD. The betrayal felt deeper somehow, more personal than simple kidnapping. The important thing is that we got out, Marcus said finally, and we stopped them from doing it to anyone else. Kevin raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. To remembering who we are. To remembering who we are, Marcus agreed. But as they sat there, watching the late afternoon sun paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there were still pieces missing from the puzzle. Memories. That felt important, crucial even, but remained just out of reach. The sensation would follow him for the rest of his life, the nagging certainty that somewhere in the gaps left by Block 44's procedures, vital truths were still hidden. And sometimes, in quiet moments when he wasn't actively trying to remember, fragments would surface, faces he couldn't place, conversations he couldn't context, decisions whose consequences had been surgically removed from his consciousness. The final twist came during the last day of testimony, when Dr. Hendricks, the young physician who had overseen their treatment, took the stand. Under oath, he revealed that Block 44 had been more successful than anyone realized. Marcus and Kevin hadn't been random subjects. They had been the program's greatest success story. For 6 weeks, they had lived completely as Rodriguez and Park, with no memory of their previous identities. The experimental subjects hadn't been trying to recover their memories. They had been living entirely constructed lives, complete with fabricated personalities, false histories, and artificial relationships with the staff who were unknowingly participating in the deception. The memories they thought they were recovering of their military service, their families, their past lives, those were real. But the memories of being Rodriguez and Park were equally real to their brains because they had been chemically and surgically implanted with the same precision as the organic ones had been suppressed. When they escaped, they weren't recovering their identities. They were choosing which identity to reclaim. The men who walked out of that hospital were neither fully Marcus Williams and Kevin Johnson, nor fully the subjects Rodriguez and Park. They were synthetic personalities combining elements of both. Artificial constructs whose sense of self had been assembled from fragments of memory, suggestion, and neurochemical manipulation. The final revelation shattered everything they thought they understood about their ordeal. They hadn't simply been victims of an illegal experiment. They had been successful test subjects in a program designed to prove that human identity itself could be engineered, erased, and rebuilt at will. And the most terrifying part wasn't what had been done to them, it was how completely convinced they were that the memories they now treasured as their real selves were any more authentic than the ones they had rejected.